The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply. USAA.
How do you become a World Barista Champion? Today, we have a treat in store for you. Our guest today, winner of the World Barista Championship, friend of mine and former colleague, Anthony Douglas. Anthony's journey to victory is a story everyone can relate to, whether you work in coffee or not. After years of coming up short, only just, Anthony continued to persevere and push through the pain to win the World Barista Championship on home soil. I've known Anthony for nearly 10 years now, and as we'll elaborate on in the podcast, he pushed himself to victory despite numerous setbacks. If you're an aspiring barista, get your notebook out because you'll want to keep some of these down on paper. Anthony Douglas, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the It's Just Coffee podcast.
Yes.
It's just coffee.
It's just coffee. So
it's good to be here.
We usually say at the same time, 3, 2, 1.
It's just coffee.
So I'm hoping you've seen that.
Yeah.
How are things, Anthony? Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. It's good to be here.
It's I've interviewed you once before.
Yes.
But it's definitely good to have a take two now.
Yeah, absolutely. Congrats on the podcast. It seems to be going very well, and thanks for having me. Things have been good. I've just started picking up again in terms of busyness and commitments, which has been good. I had a bit of a slump for a while and sort of just took some time to relax and have my foot off the pedal and just take everything in. But now I'm sort of back into it again. I'm feeling the motivation, feeling the drive. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Well, we usually start the podcast off with a bit of coffee news. So I'm gonna read you a few news stories and get your opinions on them as well. So
sure.
Anthony, Liam, hit that button. All right, first piece of news. In Australia, we have premiers. It's kind of, if you're in the US, that's like a governor. So it's like the leader of a particular state and or province. So the South Australian Premier, get this, Peter Malinauskas, drinks 6 cups of instant coffee a day. Now, I don't know how he does that, but his quote about this is, when we started living together, Annabelle, his wife, who drinks a dozen of these a day, just started making them around the house. And before I knew it, I was having them then. Literally within a month for me, I found myself having 5 coffees a day. I reckon yesterday on a parliamentary sitting day, I would have had at least 7. So it's a bad habit, but it could be worse. And then get this. He says, in South Australia, we do coffee far better than the rest of the nation. Even better than Victoria, and I say by some margin.
It's a little controversial.
That's a little controversial. And Peter, if you're listening to this or if you see this, you're addicted to instant coffee, not crack, mate. You don't need to be saying things like that. But yeah, 7 cups. I mean, if you're having a nice coffee, I can understand, but instant?
Yeah. Oh, well, we do have specialty instant. I don't know what sort of instant he's drinking. Is it the Moccona, the old jar of Moccona, or the Blend 43?
Well, Axel actually do some excellent instant coffee, and maybe we should arrange to send the Premier of South Australia a bit of instant coffee.
Yes,
I don't know.
I need to get him on the path.
Yeah, Peter, we've got a present coming for you, courtesy of the World Barista Champion. Number 2, so Los Angeles Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp has started a coffee brand called Dodo Coffee. Does anyone here follow NFL?
Not too much, sorry.
Oh, man, no one in Australia follows the NFL. I'm like the Lone Ranger. Houston Texans, I love you. But anyway, so superstar wide receiver now sells blends and some single origins under the specialty brand called Dodo Coffee. Kupp, for those of you who don't know, is the star player for the Los Angeles Rams. He's a wide receiver, so he catches the ball. Dodo also has a brick and mortar store located in Arkansas. Now, I haven't been to America, but it seems like a few good places are popping up in Arkansas because obviously there's Onyx Coffee. Yep. They're located in Arkansas, and Arkansas is kind of like a smaller state as I understand it. So, I mean, a lot of the pound-for-pound best coffees in America are coming from Arkansas now. So, I don't know. You know how we want Jimmy Butler to come on the podcast? You know Jimmy Butler, the NBA player?
I do, yes.
So, maybe we should start a campaign for Cooper Kupp because he's one of the best wide receivers in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And then the last one, India's coffee production is growing. So there's been a surge in coffee exports. India's coffee exports rose 43% in dollar terms due to higher global prices and a 13% increase in export volumes compared to the same period last year. This, according to investing.com, could also be linked to European buyers who are beating new regulations coming to place, compelling buyers to not purchase coffee linked to deforestation. Seems like the Europeans are going to be contending with a lot there if they're buying coffee, because it's like a lot of it, the transparency is quite difficult, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know how they're going to go, but good on India. And I think India actually produces some marvelous specialty coffee.
I haven't had much from them recently, but I have heard there's been a lot of push and a lot of innovation and development of their processing techniques, and they're doing a pretty good job from what I hear.
India as well is projected to, I think, by 2070 or something, to be the biggest economy in the world. Okay. So they're vastly evolving as a nation. And from what I hear, we had Ross Quayle on not too long ago, and he spoke very highly of the Indian coffee industry. And recently had some visitors here from India that in Melbourne, I should say, that were speaking about, that came to my shop and were kind of saying, look, man, India's booming. India's where it's going to be happening in the future. So, and it's a massive country geographically speaking. So it'd be great if they can do it. But
for sure,
let's get to Anthony Douglas now. First thing I want to ask, what's a World Barista Champion's coffee order?
So I keep it pretty simple. I normally order a flat white and an espresso, especially when I'm visiting our stores, because we want to see, how they're both tasting. If I'm visiting another cafe that isn't Axel, then typically if I haven't had food in my belly, I'll generally get a flat white. If I have, I'll generally get an espresso. And if I'm feeling it, I might get a filter coffee of some sort.
Yeah, okay. I feel like this is a great thing for your average punter to hear and see, because a lot of people think, oh, I have a latte. I'm not that sophisticated. I should have a black. I should have a long black. I should have a filter. Not the case, is it?
You do you.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course you do you. But a lot of people think they're too basic to be included in drinking coffee.
Oh, no,
and then coffee's one of those industries that I think people feel like they're doing a bad thing, or it's a bit too above them if they're enjoying the best of coffee. Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know. But it's good to hear that you enjoy the humble flat white, as do I. If I haven't already said it, you're a World Barista Champion, happened here in 2022. What was your start in coffee? So my understanding is you were doing something else and then you found coffee. So if you could elaborate on that for the listeners, like what the beginning of your coffee career was.
For sure. So I began working as a baker originally. I did a 4-year baking apprenticeship. And at the time of finishing the apprenticeship, I was living in Sydney. And I got tired of the late nights and the lack of social life. So I had a friend of mine who offered me a job at his restaurant, which was a Spanish restaurant in North Sydney. And every now and then I'd work behind the deli that they had there. So I'd have a shift rostered behind the deli. And I'd make like 4 or 5 really bad coffees a day, but I really enjoyed the process. I just liked making coffee. So I came back to Melbourne because I missed my family and all that sort of stuff. And when I began looking for work, I just wanted to look for positions where I could make coffee, and at the time it was quite hard to find jobs in specialty because everyone wanted you to have like 2 years experience at least. And I'm like, well, how do I get that experience, So I ended up working in like wrap bars and spud bars and, random places that just happened to do coffee as well, just to sort of get my skills up.
And what year is this about?
So I started coffee 15 years ago. So this would have been 14 or 13 to 14 years ago. So 2010?
Yep.
Yeah, about that time. And so I did a few years of that, then ended up working in a very high volume cafe in the bottom of a food court. We prided ourselves on how quickly we could serve coffee. So it was about like a 15-second extraction. It was just boom, get it to the customer as quick as possible. Not much regard for quality. Then I worked for another cafe in Camberwell. That was sort of specialty, like it was supposed to be specialty, but I don't think we really understood what specialty was. But we served Axel for a very short period of time. So Axel supplied us for a short period of time. And that was when I first had my specialty coffee sort of moment. I was like, wow, okay, so espresso can taste fruity and it can taste like this and complex. And I was like, okay, cool. I need to work for this company.
And that's always an interesting thing because I think some people, if we're to put ourselves in the shoes of the average punter, so you might not be exposed to something like this as much. Did you have a coffee? For me, I had like an Ethiopian or something that tasted like blueberries. You try it and you're like, well, hang on a second. There's something different about that. was that kind of what happened to you as well? Like there was one particular coffee you remember, or?
This coffee was a washed Sadamo Gucci.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah.
An Ethiopian, and it tasted like blueberries. And it was mind blowing, especially at the time. It was just very new. I'd always assumed that coffee was just supposed to be bitter.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there was anything else to it. So that was a very big change in perception.
And there's some coffees out there where you really don't have to do much to it. You just press the button, the water touches the coffee, it extracts, and then it just tastes excellent. And, a lot of those Ethiopian coffees fit that bill. You're good here?
Absolutely.
Yep. And so, all right, so you got exposure to the Axel coffee there. Was there a conversation that so you said they used it briefly. Did they stop and then you thought, well, hang on, I still want some of that? Is that how it worked?
That's sort of what happened. So we changed. At the time, we just didn't really understand specialty coffee. Myself, the owner, the people of the cafe. So we didn't appreciate it, and we didn't see the value in spending extra money for this particular coffee. Obviously I had an amazing experience and I loved it, but the owner especially wasn't quite on board with it. He was like, food is what really makes the money. We don't need to have such expensive coffee. And so when we started trying to cut costs, like coffee was the first thing to change. So we changed suppliers to someone who, wasn't as of higher quality, but a bit of a crowd pleaser. And yeah.
All right. So when that change happened, how long afterwards were you thinking, well, I want to make the step into being a full-time specialty barista?
I think I was there for another 6 months.
And was there ever times where they thought, oh, geez, we could really use your hands to make a loaf here, Anthony, because you had those baking skills. Was there ever times where you were utilised for that as well?
No, not at all. Actually, I haven't been asked to make any bread since I finished baking. So,
was you specifically just in bread? It wasn't like pastry or anything like that?
It was just in bread. I was working for Baker's Delight, so I did my apprenticeship through them.
Mm-hmm.
So it was mainly like loaves and rolls and scrolls and things like that. But it wasn't any croissants and things we had were frozen.
Okay, so what was the conversation that got you into Axel Coffee, which is where you work now and have done for 10 years or so?
Yep. So that first experience was the only specialty experience I had, and I wanted to work in specialty coffee, but I didn't know of any other companies. So Axel was where I went. I'd visited them a couple of times prior, buying coffee for the previous cafe. So if we needed a single origin or something like that, we weren't really set up as a wholesale account, but we just we'd buy the occasional coffee from them. And I went in one day and asked to speak to the boss. And then luckily Dave was around and he came out and we had a conversation about, I just told him I want to work for him. And I think it was coming up to Christmas as well. So he needed staff and they were flat out. And he came out like 5 minutes later with a contract, asked me to fill it out. And then he said, now, is that the easiest thing you've done in your life or what?
That is a very Dave thing to say.
Yeah.
All right. And I guess that's really where it kicked off big time for you.
Yeah.
Because there was a period there where I worked with you at Axel for very, very, very brief time at that era. And I think you'd been there for a couple of years. So were you straight away into, do you have your goal as wanting to compete from when you got there, or where did you see that fitting in with your day-to-day?
So when I first started Axel, we had quite a few people competing. We had about 5 or 6 people competing that year. And I thought the idea of it was really cool. I just saw them training and I saw them being supported and, coffee was being allocated to them. And I was like, hey, that seems really cool. I want to be a part of that. I wasn't very confident in like that year to actually compete. But then the next year I decided to give it a crack.
Yeah. And I think that's from when you began to kind of when you were really finding a lot of your success. This is before, so you were very successful in the competitions before you won everything. You were kind of in what I would describe as, a lot of people might think disagree with me, but I kind of feel like it was the most competitive era of barista competitions in a single country worldwide, because to qualify for the World Barista Championship, you have to win your own national competition, and you have to qualify for that national competition by beating out regional circuits. And so that, like, for me, that sort of 2015 to 2020 era was just the most competitive era. Probably even started earlier than that, maybe 2013, when you had, you know, your Matt Pergers and Craig Simons and
Sasha
and Hugh Kelly and all these people, Jay Jennings as well. I think, you know, marvelous baristas. Would you agree that was like there's some people that could all be World Barista Championships champions in their own right?
Absolutely. You know, and I think that's one of the reasons why it took me so long to win the nationals, and one of the reasons why Australians, when they reach the World Championship, they're so prepared, because they've spent so long just trying to beat all these other people in their national competition. Right. So like I spent, 7 years just trying to beat the Craig Simons and the Matt Pergers and the Hugh Kelly, and they smashed me every single year until I could finally, step up on the world stage. So
that's something I want to dig deep, go a little bit deeper on, if I may. Yeah. So you're able to sort of talk about it fondly and smile about it now. But what was it like at the time? Because for me, it's like, geez, this is like climbing, the wall that separates the Westeros to the wildlings in Game of Thrones. It's kind of like scaling that.
Yeah.
Remember when Tormund Giantsbane is scaling up that? That's kind of like what you did, in my opinion. I think it's an Everest-like hill. Is that kind of what it was like for you?
Yeah, it was hard work. It was very hard work, and considering the experience they had in competition, it was hard for me to go into a competition and with the expectation that I was going to win. But look, at the end of the day, I just focused on becoming better and better each year, and my scores were gradually improving year after year, and I sort of knew where I was going wrong, and eventually you've already made all the mistakes, so you end up having that time where you hit that run, and yeah.
How many years did you compete before you won the Australian Barista Championship?
7 years.
7 years, okay.
Yeah.
And so I guess that breakthrough moment is what I'll ask you about now, because obviously you've had to do so much preparation 7 different times, and then to finally break through. There was some interesting parts. Well, I'm fortunate enough to know, because I've been around you. So there was one competition where you and I competed against each other. There's, really, really, I consider it a cool shot of myself coming third, you coming second, and Jack Simpson coming first.
Yeah.
So Jack, most recently, the second place in the World Barista Championship. And we did a great video on him, and we're going to get him in on the podcast soon. Was that also kind of like a bitter pill to swallow at the time, because you'd been working for so long, and I think Jack in his second year he beat you in that one competition. And that was a bit of a sore point for a little bit of time, wasn't it?
Yes.
And how did you, what were you feeling at the time? Was that kind of like, well, I'm doing all this work and then someone can just come in and beat me?
I think,
and within your own team as well?
Yeah. So I think I'm sure a lot of competitors do the same. I know a lot of them do, but I always placed a lot of pressure on myself to do well. And, there was definitely a correlation between the amount of support I was getting from Axel and other people for that matter, and how well I felt I needed to perform on stage. So in my point of view, I think that was like my 4th year competing or something along those lines. And I was like, okay, it's my 4th year. I should be getting better at this, and I'm getting all this support, and I had a lot of expectation on myself. And then Jack sort of cruised in, and it was his 2nd year competing, I think it was. And he blitzed me in the regional championship. And at the time, it was a really good thing for me to happen at the time, because it was very painful, but it sort of helped me realize that I had a lot of mental, sort of obstacles to overcome, and mental demons that I needed to work through if I ever was to become a champion.
This is a good segue into what I wanted to ask you next, is because I think one of the biggest things that, having known you through all this time, and one of the biggest observations that I was able to make was when you won was overcoming the mental element of it. And this is something that everyone listening can sort of take away, whether you're working coffee, competing barista competitions or not. You actually sort of consulted a mind coach
Yes.
And a lot of people listening to this and think, a barista competition and a mind coach, that is going way over the top. But I think these competitions are becoming more and more serious every year. It's more and more lucrative to win, I guess, in many ways. More and more people are interested in winning it. And so you took the effort to overcome some things with a mind coach. And so what were some of the things that you were dealing with, and how did your mind coach, Darren, who I was lucky enough to meet as well, how did you overcome them?
Yeah. So I think I'd always sort of struggled with a lack of confidence, a lack of conviction, and there were all sorts of mental roadblocks that I'd faced throughout competition. So I became pretty aware of these things early on, and I became very interested in like self-improvement, self-development, and, the importance of mindset and things like that, and the year prior to me winning, I had a pretty rough run. I wasn't taking care of myself physically. I wasn't taking care of myself mentally. And I was just sort of like spiraling, and I got on stage, and when I called time after my routine, I knew I placed second. Like I called time. I was like, yep, I'm second. There's no way I was winning it. And I sort of reflected on that quite a lot, because I knew I had the awareness to sort of know that I was very mentally weak at that point. And even though I knew all these ideas about, mindset, I needed someone to help me sort of apply them and keep me accountable. So that's when I started working with Darren, and we had like weekly check-ins, and we'd sort of talk through what was going on, and he'd sort of help fine-tune thought processes that may be sabotaging me in my preparation.
And Darren also is a consummate professional, works with professional athletes, not some guy that you see on your sponsored Instagram feed.
Yeah.
He's
the real deal.
Yeah, he's the real deal.
Yeah.
And so you just noted there lack of confidence.
Yep.
If you can give one pearl of wisdom, not even coffee related, so we're on this mindfulness now, what's one pearl of wisdom that sort of Darren gave you that you can give to the listener or the viewer?
Okay.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Saturday, bring it on.
One thing that comes to mind, and he had lots of things that he gave me, but one thing is to talk to yourself like you're your own best friend, right? So, for example, there were plenty of times where I'd wake up in the morning, I'd be too overwhelmed to even get in the training room. Even the first 2 weeks of my preparation for the World Championship, I avoided the training room like it was a plague, and I only had 5 weeks to prepare in total. So I sort of really prepared in 3 weeks. The first 2 weeks, I was so riddled with overwhelm and anxiety around competition. But what he sort of taught me anyway was, in that situation, let's say you've got a friend, right, who they're not in the training room and they look like they're having a hard time. Would you say, hey, what the hell is wrong with you? You're about to represent your country in 5 weeks. What are you doing in bed? Being lazy and you're not working, and like, no, that's not how you talk to your friend. You'd say, hey, is everything okay? I noticed you haven't been in the training room recently. Do you want to talk about it? Is there anything I can do to help? So that's something that I realized I had to change within myself, because when I'd have moments like that, my first thing to do is I'd sort of beat myself up and say, Anthony, what's wrong with you? Like, you know what to do. Just do it. Just get over it, And I'd mentally fatigue myself because I'm so hard on myself that it would reduce my energy, and I'd end up taking less action anyway. Right, so there's a bit of a cycle.
Yeah, and these are things that I'm going to go ahead and speculate you've kind of carried on into your everyday life, even still. Because before we started the podcast, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but you said to Liam and I, "Hey, do you mind if I just have a couple of minutes, just going to decompress?" Yep. And you kind of sat there with your headphones in and your eyes closed for a little bit. Is that kind of more or less continuing on that journey?
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing I learned and appreciated through competition is your mindset and the state of mind that you're in when you perform, or when you have a test, or you do a podcast, or whatever it might be, really plays upon your performance, right? So I think whenever I have something important coming up, it's now a bit of a habit where I'll take time to meditate and to really clear my mind, just make sure I'm in the best state to be present and really enjoy it and just deliver who I am.
So an important milestone, you think, all right, I want to give the best of myself to this, and so that's when you do it? Is that sort of fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so. And
treating yourself with kindness.
Yeah, okay.
And it just feels good.
Yeah. Being your own best friend.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's it.
In terms of the preparation now,
yeah.
So some people listening to this, they may be listening for the first time thinking, what the hell is preparing for a barista competition like? So obviously you got to try and make the best coffees. We've spoken about that on previous podcasts, but what was it like for you preparing for that? Because again, got to win the regional. I think this was a COVID affected year, so maybe you just had the one national that year. I can't remember.
Wow, it wasn't that long ago, but I can't remember either.
Okay, well,
I think we had the regional as well.
Right. So there's a regional, then there's a national, which again you beat some pretty heavy hitters that year as well. So you got your Angus Mackeys of the world, Gabriel Tan, who's now had a lot of competition success. Yeah. Tough circuit to get through.
Yeah.
What's it like preparing? One, for the the mechanics of the competition yourself, because you got to remember a 15-minute speech.
Yeah.
Which pretty tough in the best of times. Then you've got to program yourself to sort of do certain actions within a certain time, remembering that speech, and then also making the best coffee of your goddamn life while doing it.
Yeah.
So what was your methodology and approach to that?
So it's one of those things where you start out with a plan and, things fall apart pretty quickly, but you've just got to keep constantly planning and adapting. And, I'm very lucky that I've got the team around me that I do. Dave Macon, Matthew Crowley, Jack Simpson. We spent a lot of time together. And, obviously the first focus is always sourcing coffee, because that's the centerpiece of the routine and also your points as well. It's all about making good coffee and describing it accurately. So we spent a lot of energy in sourcing coffee and samples from different producers and just really leaving no stone unturned in terms of the coffee choice. And then from there, piecing it together with my concept. So the concept that I had sort of been in development for about 4 years, or it had been cooking, cooking away for a while and just starting to figure out, okay, how are we actually going to shape this into a routine? Yeah.
And I think as well, when you won a coffee from El Diviso in Colombia.
Yes.
So it was anaerobic natural sidra. Is that what it was?
Yeah, that's right.
And it was an intensely sweet coffee. Yeah. Both through milk and also a very widely available coffee, which is one of the things when you won using it. I think I saw it pop up with multiple roasters, which was an awesome thing.
Yeah.
But in a way, I remember working with the coffee because now it's coming back to me. It wasn't a regional, and when you won the regional using it, you sold some to me, and. It had quite this is not taking shots at producers or anything, but it had quite a lot of Quakers in it.
Okay.
And so I remember sorting through it, and this is just a layer for barista competition for people to know about. So Quakers is kind of like a defect in a coffee bean, would you say?
Yep.
And if you get, I think even one in among whatever amount of beans are in an espresso shot, it could ruin it can make your coffee tastes a little less good. So,
absolutely.
I remember actually seeing some photos of you, Matt Crowley and Jack Simpson going through kilograms of coffee and sorting through Quakers. How many hours do you reckon you spent doing that? This is the roasted coffee. Sorry, this is the roasted coffee that's roasted and you can see the defects and you're sorting through it. How many hours do you reckon you spent?
Yeah, so it wasn't just Quakers too, but it was just any variation in the beans. And that's one of the things you find too with a lot of these extended fermentation coffees is there does tend to be a bit more variation in the way they process and the way they dry and ultimately how they roast. When we sorted the final batch for competition, like the roast I was going to take on stage and use as potentials, I think it took us 5 hours for the three of us in the training room. We cranked some music. We were listening to all sorts of stuff. I think Britney Spears came up at one point. And yeah, we just cranked through it and just sorted out any beans that were a little too dark or a little too light or Quakers or, yeah.
And this is just some of the painstaking work that goes into it, I guess. And one thing that I'll commend you on, and I'm surprised you didn't sort of mention about this, maybe don't want to be self-congratulatory or self-ingratiating in any way, but you're one of the most organized people I've ever met. So, Anthony has, you start the day with a diary, right? And you're always filling out your diary and you're very, very meticulous about your diary.
Yep.
I guess that's a superpower. And sort of how did you use that to the best of your advantage when you were preparing for these things and to compete?
Yeah, well, I think I think a big concept of mine in the competition was to leave no stone unturned. So what that meant was anytime I had an idea of something I should do or I could do, I wrote it down and I experimented with it or I explored it in some way or another to come to some sort of conclusion. And that's what I feel helped build the rock solid confidence that I had going on stage, because I knew that I had explored everything and I created a cheat sheet of exactly how I was going to make coffee. And, I think the level of complexity of a routine or preparation that you want to undertake will always be limited by the level of your organizational system. Right. So if you don't have a system built up.
Just repeat that again. The level of
complexity that you want your routine to be or that you want your preparation to be is always going to be limited by the level of your organizational system or your productivity system or whatever you want to call it. Right. So in order for me not to be limited, I really try to make sure that I have a system that really helps me keep track of all those open loops and track them and manage them in a way, that I feel confident that they're dealt with. Right? So
what's in practice? What's an example of that? So, I mean, you're so organized that this can't go wrong. What's an example?
As in of the system itself, or
like when you're applying it to competition when you did. So so give us an example that.
Well, I think I just wanted to remove as much doubt as possible. And I wanted to standardize as much as possible. So many baristas spend months and months and months preparing and they go to all this hard work, but then they unfortunately they don't deliver that on stage because of silly mistakes. They forgot this item, or they forgot to cut their coffee open at the right time, or they didn't find the right age for their coffee, or they haven't practiced their setup time enough. All these little things, just these little logistic and organizational things, like I had my setup time mapped out. It was a 53-step setup time, and I had that as a workflow, and I memorized every single one of those steps, so I could recite it to you. Not now, but at the time I could, So my setup time was mapped out. I had my practice time mapped out. Everything was just standardized as much as possible. Just so I was replicating the same experience on stage as I would be back home in the training room.
Was there ever a moment where you thought to yourself during, I guess I'll ask you about the Worlds year. By now you're really competitive. Actually, no, I won't. I'll ask you the whole time.
Sure.
Was there ever a stage where you're just thinking, fuck this. Why am I doing this? This is so hard. I spent so much time doing it. I drive myself crazy drinking all this coffee. And I kind of feel physically unwell when I'm even just tasting coffee and having to spit it out.
Yeah.
Was there ever a moment where you just thought you were going to go crazy?
Yeah, so many times, especially, well, firstly, every time I'd finished a competition, and this was before I won, I would be like, geez, why am I doing this? I'm never going to do this again. And then sure enough, I'd get the itch. But especially my preparations earlier in competition when I really had some pretty poor mindset attached to my preparation, and I was just burning the midnight candle, and, I wasn't really eating well, and no social life, just compromising relationships left, right, and center. And yeah, that was when I was like, yeah, fuck this. This isn't sustainable, I didn't give up, thankfully, at that time, but I definitely need to figure out what I could do to try and make it more sustainable and more enjoyable.
I guess it's kind of, and you remember Producer Lamb about this when we when we did the review of Mikhail and Jack's routine, and Mikhail had kind of said himself, because, I think him and Jack are kind of going, or he's just been through, and Jack, probably still has a bit of his competition career to go, is that he said he went through the fire. And it kind of sounds like, you did go through the fire, and part of Mikhail's story, who is our reigning World Barista Champion, current World Barista Champion, is he had been there 2 times before at the World Barista Championship. So, he's got some serious miles in the tank as well.
Yeah.
So, like, it's kind of good for me to kind of hear that as well, like, interesting synergy between you two, because people just, it doesn't matter what type of competition it is, whether you're doing CrossFit, bodybuilding, pickleball, or barista competitions. I really respect people that dedicate so much time to something and then achieve it. So I think there's an interesting piece of synergy in there.
I feel the same way. I think too, a lot of the reason why people don't succeed in certain things is just purely because they give up too early. And I'll talk about Ross Quayle quickly, because this is my second year competing. So my first year I humiliated myself because I had no idea how to compete, how to prepare. And I was like, I'm never doing that again. So I worked pretty hard the second year and I got some decent results. And Ross Quayle said to me that night at the after party, he was like, mate, whatever you do, don't stop. I don't know when your time's coming, but it's coming. Okay. Trust me. And that sort of stuck with me. And I sort of thought too, I was like, well, the only way I lose is if I quit. As long as I keep competing each year and correcting my mistakes, I'm not going to lose. Like, the only time you really fail is when you give up. So
I love hearing these Ross Quaylisms, because we've had the Quayle on the show, and he's kind of someone I always say about him when I describe him to other people, and he's been a great mentor to me. Yeah. Is that he could sell you your own house.
We need a book with his quotes.
Oh, we should
put something together.
It's almost like we could have a Ross Quayle segment. The quailing. So, because I call it getting quailed, because he's got these very imparting words that he gives out. But that's awesome to hear. Yeah. How he said something that impacted you.
Yeah.
We recently did a podcast about the sort of SCA, kind of announcing that they had disqualified some producers for cheating by using infused coffees, I think it was. Yep. Or they were saying that had foreign additives that were not part of their natural DNA.
Yeah.
And they included the thermal shock process in that sort of wording. And I thought, it's a bit harsh. It kind of reminded me of, well, not really reminded me, but when you won the World Barista Championship, in the aftermath, there were some people from Australia that kind of not accused you, but sort of said things about, you used a doctored coffee, you used an infused coffee or whatever, which I never thought to be true, because you can always taste. You can taste exactly what it tastes like to have.
You can. Yeah.
It's got this sort of borderline alcoholic flavor, kind of powdery, kind of like a jube. I don't know. But there's a distinct taste about it.
Absolutely. And you also, it smells very different to how it tastes as well. So it will generally smell quite good, and you can smell whatever it's been infused with, even on the green. But then, you taste the extraction, and if it isn't extracted very well, there's a total disconnect between the two.
Yeah. And so what was it like after you had won to kind of hear your peers saying that about you as well? I mean, you're a very stoic guy, and I'm sure you dealt with it quite well, but was there part of you that was disappointed?
I think that's the best word for it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. I was just disappointed, because it just, especially people who I have a level of respect for in the industry, and they compete themselves, and the fact that they would slander someone else's work, like myself or a producer, or insinuate that myself or the judges on stage couldn't recognize that it wasn't infused coffee. And, I was just disappointed, Yeah.
And part of the interesting part of this as well is that in the sort of SCA Panama thing, I feel like when they said thermal shock, it kind of was like, okay, that's a big shot at some Colombian producers. I kind of just put too many people under the same brush. You know what I mean? Maybe they're right. Maybe. But I don't know. I just don't like hearing about those things. In terms of, like, for the record, and I know we're talking about this again, but I firmly believe that infused coffees, co-fermented coffees, do not belong in a Best of Panama or a Cup of Excellence competition.
Yep, I agree with that.
There's an argument for having them inside a World Barista Championship because it's like, I think it's too hard to police against it. Because to test for it, you would have to, it would be at great expense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think they should be judged under a different category. I think there's a place for them in the market. And I think if they want to have their, competitions with infused coffees, they do need to be judged separately. As far as being on the World Barista Championship stage, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but we as baristas, we simply have to use coffees. If we want to score well, we need to use coffees that align themselves to the score sheet. And particularly the year that I won, I needed a coffee that was big and had definable flavor notes, right? To tick that accuracy of flavor box. I needed a coffee that was sweet, right? So to increase the taste experience, it was textural. And not that the coffee I used was infused, but, extended fermentation, like those sort of coffees tend to perform a bit more favorably. And it's just the way the score sheet's been set up.
Mm. Yeah, maybe. I don't know how they can iron it out, but I mean, it'll be... Maybe it gets used. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Sorry, did you have something?
I was just about to say, on that note, though, I think the change to the score has allowed a lot less subjectivity around flavor notes and things like that. So I think we are seeing the ability for people to use more washed coffees. Mikhail went with a washed coffee for his espresso course, right? And coffees that don't have those punch you in the face flavor notes and are more nuanced and more complex.
This is the thing about barista competitions is that there's no clear way to win. I always say to people, like, I mean, there's sort of rules and guidelines, but cup tasters of all the things is the only one where there's a pretty clear, objective way to win. Yeah. You sort the most correct amount of cups within a time frame. Yeah. Latte art, brewers, barista. There's no clear way to win.
Yeah.
That's one of the toughest things about it. But I must press on.
Sure.
I had a question that's just burning on my mind I want to ask. What's your vision for the coffee industry for the next 10 years? So you're someone that a lot of people would look up to in the industry, and you're probably, get invited to view a lot of things, get exposed to a lot of the best equipment nowadays. What's your vision for the industry going forward? What do you want to see more of?
I think what I want to see more of, and what I see there being more of, is sort of some of the stuff that you do and you have been doing with Sub-Zero, those extended menus and, ideally just a better execution of those menus, not from your part, but just in general. I feel like a lot of people try to emulate that wine bar experience, but, coffee being what it is, it's not a bottle that you open and serve. There's so much room for error on the barista's part, which can lead to disappointment. So I do see more of those experiences happening at a much higher level. And I think, tools and innovations and developments over the years will hopefully facilitate that. So that way we can accurately represent, coffees in a menu such as that.
That's an interesting point, because I feel like coffee is one of these industries where the more effort that you put in, the more barriers you want to break, and the more innovations you want to make. People, for some reason, pick on the coffee industry for wanting to grow and be better. Mm-hmm. I don't hear anyone saying that about wine or beer or food. But if you want to push yourself in coffee, then a lot of people think, oh, that's wanky. Hopefully that's a stigma we can break down one day.
I think a lot of that stems, and this is just my own opinion, I think a lot of that stems from the disappointment that a lot of people have faced having specialty coffee experiences. Like I've been to cafes and I've had a barista push like a $20 geisha onto me, and I'll be like, oh, all right, go on. And they'll serve it to me, and it doesn't live up to the expectation that they say it will. And then how are people supposed to appreciate specialty coffee if it's not being represented properly in the cup? So I think there's a lot that needs to happen, on that side of things first, to start that paradigm shift and start changing people's way of thinking.
One other question I needed to ask was, who were some of your idols in the industry when you were coming up to your World Barista Championship win, and who influenced you greatly?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, my boss, Dave Macon. So he's an absolute legend. He's a two-time Australian champion, came second in the world in 2008. So working under him was incredibly inspirational. And Craig Simon as well. He's an absolute freak when it comes to, being a barista and roasting and just all things coffee. He used to frustrate me a lot in the past where we'd make coffee together and his coffee was just, it would blow mine out of the water, at the same
We had him
recipe.
here a few weeks ago. He made me an awesome coffee.
He's insanely good at what he does. So he motivated me a lot and was a big source of inspiration. Guys like Matt Perger, Pete Licata, and of course the people around me at the moment, Jack Simpson, Matt Crowley. I'm very fortunate to have worked with a lot of amazing people across my career.
Can you name one person alive and one person dead that you'd love to have coffee with?
Yeah. One person I'd love to have coffee with who's alive would be Tim Ferriss. So, are you familiar with Tim Ferriss?
He's the what does he do?
4-hour work week. 4-hour body.
Yeah, I know him. I always
He's
post about him on LinkedIn.
He's got a very successful podcast. And he's a very smart guy. And especially when it comes to things, productivity, which I'm into, he's all about how can I do things more effectively, more efficiently, and yeah. So I respect him a great deal.
Tim, coffee. Anthony wants to have a coffee. Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Someone who is currently not alive. That is a hard one. Yeah, it's not something I think about every day.
If I were to give a not alive answer myself, well, hold on. I'll go my live one first. Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
I'm a huge basketball fan. Would love to have coffee with Michael Jordan. That would be totally 100% awesome. Dead? Oh, Marcus Aurelius or, Julius Caesar or someone like that.
He actually came to mind, Marcus Aurelius. I'd love to talk to some sort of Stoic philosopher or, that'd be cool.
And just how, that, how there's the internet thing about the Roman Empire, what's the man's Roman Empire these days? Just how they built infrastructure and stuff back then and, how they actually thought about things back in the day. I find that quite interesting,
I haven't looked into that side of it, but yeah.
Well, so we lock in Marcus Aurelius for your...
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Last question before the next two segments. What would you like people to remember you by? Anthony Douglas, what do you want when you're retired or it's all said and done, or even if you stop right now, what would you want people to remember you by?
Good question. And this is something I've thought about recently. I'm scared of people remembering me as the 2022 World Barista Champion, and I've thought about this a great deal because I don't want that thing to be my identity. But I would like people to remember me as... within the world of coffee or just life or...
Yeah, both.
Both, yeah. Within the world of coffee, I want people to remember me as having an impact and helping support people on their journey in coffee, I suppose. So a little background to that. I spent a lot of my career training people and I have a great deal of fulfillment from doing that, and I've learned a lot over the years and I've been lucky enough to have done so. So I'd like to pass a lot of that on. So if people can sort of remember me as... hey, this guy's helped a lot of people make really good coffee all over the world. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Life?
In life, just someone who gave their all to everything they did and lived without regrets.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, one of our I've got two more segments to get through. So
Sure.
The first one is rapid fire questions. So
Okay.
I'm going to ask you about 20 questions.
Should I be scared?
No, we should got to try and answer them within a minute.
Okay.
So producer Liam's going to hit the button. Are you ready, Anthony Douglas?
So ready.
All right, let's hit it.
We're going to bring the heat, make it a little stressful for you.
It's just questions.
Here we go.
And your time starts now.
Coffee order.
Flat white.
Washed or natural?
Natural.
Co-fermented, yes or no?
Yes.
Geisha or Katura?
Geisha.
Colombia or Panama?
Panama.
Ooh. Filter or espresso?
Espresso.
7-Eleven or Coles coffee?
Coles.
Instant or McDonald's?
Instant.
Beer or wine?
Wine.
Halal snack pack or McDonald's hotcakes?
Hello, snack pack.
Favorite
Oh,
Bee Gees album?
Don't have one.
Best coffee podcast ever?
It's just coffee.
Most underrated coffee venue in Melbourne?
Underrated coffee venue. God, that's a hard one. Maybe Core Roasters.
Okay, favourite sport?
Billiards.
Best dinner in Melbourne?
Best dinner in Melbourne. Gimlet.
Best breakfast in Melbourne?
Udom House.
Coffee country you don't buy from that you want to? Sorry, that was not meant to be in there. I'm gonna ask you 3 more just after the siren.
Sure.
Xiaolong Bao or ravioli?
Ooh, ravioli.
I knew you'd say that.
You're a Xiaolong Bao guy, right?
No, because we were just having a discussion with Sonam about, would you go Xiaolong Bao? Is that what I say? Is it Xiaolong Bao or ravioli? I answered ravioli. He's like, Anthony's going to say Xiaolong Bao for sure. And then I was like, nah, he's going to say ravioli. Best barista you've encountered? I guess we'll take Craig Simon or?
I think so, yeah. Him or Dave Macon. It's very hard.
Last day on earth, what coffee are you having? So, not just a flat white espresso. What the farm?
Yeah, honestly, it would have to be Jack Simpson's Jamison Savage, his Finca Nirvana. Okay. That was mind-blowing. Yeah. So good.
Finca Deborah bringing the heat this year.
Deborah, yeah.
They one of the best farms, probably the best farm in the world, I guess you could say right now.
Yeah.
Now, the last segment we have every week is the now infamous extra hot take with 2 sugars. I kind of want to finish I want to finish on a high, so we'll go with yours. Okay. So I'm going to deliver my extra hot take with 2 sugars, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Liam, it's getting hot in here. Guys, my extra hot take with 2 sugars is there's no such thing as a coffee snob. There just isn't. The difference is you like bad coffee or you like good coffee. You're not a snob if you enjoy something good. If you want to drink coffee that tastes like an ashtray or is objectively worse, that's fine. Yeah, I'm not here to judge your life choices. But don't call someone else a snob who's like, I enjoy the good stuff. Remember that line, and we've quoted this before on this podcast, like Quentin Tarantino in Pulp Fiction, where he's like, I don't know how good the coffee is, okay? I'm the one who buys it. When my wife goes to the store, she buys shit. I buy the good stuff. There's no such thing as a coffee snob. Get it out of your dirty mouths. That's my hot take with 2 sugars.
Very good.
Do you agree, disagree?
I agree. Yeah, for sure. I'm not a snob. I drink coffee for convenience as well, just as much as I love the good stuff.
Every now and then I'll have an instant Peter Malinauskas style, so to speak. If I'm to get, I'm cool these days. I know what the kids are up to. I can do the pop culture references. You got to slay a few dragons to get the princess. Wink, wink. So every now and then I do the unspeakable, and I have a dodgy coffee. So, but. I prefer the good ones, and I'm not a snob for it. That's my extra hot take with 2 sugars. Anthony?
Very good. Very good. Do I have a time limit for this, or?
No, just
no time limit.
Down the barrel. Tell the punters, tell the people.
Okay. All right. So when you asked me to do this, I had a few things I was thinking of. And I think the biggest one that comes to mind is this. So my hot take with 2 sugars is barista championships don't necessarily showcase barista skill.
Ooh! You're kind of shooting yourself in the foot there because you're a World Barista Champion.
Let me add a bit of context as well. So not all the time. Sometimes they do, but not all the time. So we're at a point in the competition now where we have tools distributing the coffee for us. We have tools tamping the coffee for us. We work with the coffee for months, fine-tuning and adjusting every little variable. We have world-class coaches holding our hand and guiding us through the process. And not everyone has this, so I think this makes it not very accessible, makes competition not very accessible for a lot of people and doesn't necessarily reward people for the skills that they have as a barista where they might not have those level of resources. Even in the, let's say the finals, the semi-finals as well, I've seen barista competitors in their practice time. This is at the world level, and the coach is dialing in the coffee for them. The coach is telling them what the descriptors are. The coach is saying, hey, try this yield or try this temperature, and the barista is more or less a puppet. And at least in my opinion, that's not what these competitions are about. That's not what being a barista is about. So that's my hot take with 2 sugars. And I can add a bit more if you like.
Oh, let's get an alarm, then we'll get some sprinkles on top.
Okay, so that's what I feel part of the problem is. As for the solution, I think we need to introduce some sort of open round or open service like they do for the Brewers Cup.
So compulsory round.
Exactly, a compulsory round, sorry. So there are so many baristas up there who, if you give them a black bag of coffee and 15 minutes to dial it in and develop descriptors, they would do an amazing job. I think we need a round like this that combines with the round of the performance, right? So we're not just judging the barista on this performance that they've immaculately, put together, but we're also basing them on, can you dial in an unknown coffee using a manual tamper, no distribution tool, and can you describe it how it tastes?
This is our first. Usually we say extra hot latte or extra hot coffee with 2 sugars. This is an extra hot cappuccino with 2 sugars, if I may say so myself, because you did the coffee, then you put the sprinkles on top.
The foam on top, and a bit of extra chocolate.
I like it.
If I can add a little bit more as well.
It's double shot.
No. I just want to clear it up. I want to wrap this up nicely. I love the competition. I love the format that it's at. And I think too, with the current format, it encourages creativity and it really helps us push the industry forward. And I've gained so much through competing. I've gained so much through the current format of competition. I think it's perfect. I think we just need to add a little something else just to help recognize.
Make it perfect.
Skill. Exactly.
One thing that we kind of discuss as a group, like myself, Liam, Rowan, and Sonam, is particularly about this kind of space. So there's ideas that we have about trying to uplift the competition to make it so that there's, I think barista competition will become a really calendar event for a lot more people, not necessarily that work in the industry, because right now it seems like it's people that work in the industry and suppliers essentially of machinery and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I want to make it like a event where so many more people are interested in it and want to be a part of it, and it's just a genuinely good thing. And I really do think that's the future of it. And one day we can get the common man, the punter involved, and I'm looking forward to that.
For sure too. And as far as making it more accessible, so New Zealand's already doing a bit of a compulsory service, in that they'll give competitors the same coffee to dial in. And I think Australia's adopting it this year as well, which I think is a massive first step, at least in the regional level, of encouraging more people to compete, because we're not seeing enough people getting involved in competition, and the level of resources that people feel they need and the level of competition that we're at is intimidating for a lot of people. So I think we're starting to head in that direction, but yeah.
Well, I like that. The extra hot and strong cappuccino with 2 sugars, delivered by one Anthony Douglas, World Barista Champion. It's been an hour. I won't keep you waiting for any more. Thank you so much for joining.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
That was a very good extra hot take with 2 sugars. Thank you so much again. And as always, guys, and we say it at the same time, remember, it's just coffee. Well, that's a wrap for episode 19.
Cool.
Thank you.
Nice work.